And we welcome you in on News4Jax.com and News4Jax Plus. Cole Pepper, Jamal St. Cyr. Time to take a look at the Jaguars schedule that was released just minutes ago. And we're going to break down what we think about the Jaguars schedule, some interesting little notes, and maybe the way the season could play out. That could be changing 6 or 7 times between now and the start of training camp, much less anything else. But let's go ahead and just jump right into it, Jamal. We knew a little bit about this schedule before things started because of the London game. Some other little notes that were coming out, but some interesting things about this schedule. Let's start right out of the gate with the season opener at the Washington Commanders. Yep. It'll be the first game ever in the regular season for the Washington Commanders.
That's right. It's also a return of Carson Wentz. He might be seeing ghosts a little bit. He played the Jaguars at the end of last season. Now it gets them week 1 with a new team. Carson Wentz, Doug Peterson actually know each other pretty well from their time together in Philadelphia. So Doug Peterson gets to see his old quarterback again.
I will also point out that, and we don't know exactly what the league will be doing, but typically when opening day is on 9/11, which it's been a couple of times, there are a lot of remembrances that the league puts together for that. The fact that the Jaguars will be in Washington may ramp that up even more. It could be more of a somber moment beforehand, and then we'll get it going. Again, that's a 1 o'clock start. That's going to be a trend in this schedule. All right, week 2, the home opener. The Indianapolis Colts come to town. Carson Wentz's old team, and the team the Jaguars beat to ruin their chances of the playoffs at the end of last season. Also, Press Taylor, the Jaguars' new offensive coordinator, comes from Indianapolis. So, in addition to it being a division game, this has got a lot of storylines heading into the home opener.
There are a few different storylines. This will be Matt Ryan's first introduction into the AFC South with this matchup against the Jaguars. The Colts haven't won here in Jacksonville in a while, so they're going to obviously be trying to break that losing streak on their end, but the Jaguars want to keep that winning streak going. This could be a good way for them to get the season started since they seem to have the Colts number, at least when they play them here in Jacksonville.
2014 was the last time the Colts came to Jacksonville and left with a win. Even though the Jaguars haven't been very good, they've had the Colts number through the years.
They were the one in 2020.
That's right. That was the one and only. All right. Week 3, cross-country trip. This is when the Jaguars start to pile up those frequent flyer miles for sure. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. They go cross-country to take on the LA Chargers. Justin Herbert, 2 very good years coming out of the gate as a rookie, then a second-year player. Of course, the AFC West is loaded. This is going to be the best, most competitive division, I think, in the National Football League. This is a tough task for the Jaguars in week 3, but it'll be a real test for where the Jaguars are, especially defensively.
Yeah, this will be the first test of that newly rebuilt Jaguars defense. Those first 2 offenses, okay. The Chargers offense is legit. Justin Herbert obviously has been putting up numbers. You start talking about wide receivers, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler in the backfield. This is going to be a test for all of that Jaguars defense. They've brought in a lot of new faces. They'll have a couple of weeks before they have to get put to the first test.
Well, we really know as well how the Jaguars typically do traveling from East Coast to West Coast.
Doesn't go well.
Has not gone well traditionally. This will be a tough one in LA. Then next up, week 4, the Doug Peterson special. The Jaguars coach heads back to the city where he won a championship. I think he will be warmly greeted by the Philadelphia fans, who don't always warmly greet the opponents. But this will be a good game, I think, as well. 1 o'clock start again in this one for the Jags in Philadelphia. You look at Philly and you think, well, where is this team? Jalen Hurts, the quarterback, backed up by Gardner Minshew, of course. This is one of those games where right now you'd think Philly would be favored if you started, looking at the lines for games right now, but I'm not sure that's necessarily going to be the case by the time we get closer to this game.
Maybe. You never know. Philadelphia is a team that thinks they're heading in the right direction. Obviously, they're sticking with Jalen Hurts for another season. It could be a team where they hit the field and they're on fire, and it could be one where in those first 3 weeks they go into that game 0-3. You never know with the Eagles, especially with the way they're built right now, so it could really go either way.
And you notice right here, first 4 games of the season, road, road, road. 3 road games out of 4 to start. And in week 5, the Jaguars will be back home for a 1 o'clock start against the Houston Texans. Remember, the Jaguars opened at the Texans last year. Urban Meyer's first game. It was a organizational disaster the way things went. Houston still has issues. We know they have a quarterback issue. They're going to stick with Davis Mills, the second-year quarterback there. I think Houston's going to be one of the worst teams in the league this year. I thought that last year, and it turned out basically they were. The Jaguars were even worse. I think the Jaguars will be much better this year, but that'll be the first opportunity for the Jaguars to see the Texans. And you'll also note that the first 2 home games, both in the division.
That's right. The Texans obviously hitting that hard kind of reset on their roster. This is a multi-year rebuild for them. It's widely expected that they will struggle at least again this season. Last year, they did have the Jaguars number, hopefully with a competent coaching staff. I think it's okay to call them competent in place, that they'll be able to win those games that people think they should win, which both games last year against the Texans, they should have won.
Yeah, well, had a chance to had they been a little more organized in most cases. All right, let's look at the next 5 games on the schedule. A quick road trip to Indianapolis. So the Jaguars are going to see a lot of the Colts here in the first month and a half of the season. And by the time they're done with the 6th game, they will have played 3 games in the division.
Yeah, and when you get those division games, you start to figure out where you're going to be at in the pecking order. So it's always good to have at least a few early on in the season. Obviously, when you're hoping for the playoffs, you want to keep a few in your pocket for late in the year. But to get a few out of the way, just so you know, maybe they can win both of those games against the Colts, and all of a sudden you have that in your back pocket saying, I'm feeling pretty good.
Then a game, again, I think you start talking about wins, loss, wins, loss. You start putting an L or a W by it to project forward. Giants have some issues as well. They're sticking with Daniel Jones at quarterback. This is a team that was picking high. They had 2 top 10 picks in the draft this year. This is going to be an intriguing game as well. Another 1 o'clock start for the Jaguars. Again, we said that was going to be a trend this season. I think this is a game that certainly you could start thinking about as a potential W for the Jaguars, taking on the Giants, who will have to come into town here in Jacksonville to play.
Yeah, the Giants have their own set of issues, so this is definitely expected to be a winnable game. Daniel Jones has not shown much of anything that people like. That's why the Giants didn't pick up his 5th-year option. So this is definitely a game that if everything starts to go the Jaguars' way early, that people will start looking at this one saying, I think they can get a W.
Kayvon Thibodeau will be compared to Trayvon Walker as well, to pass rushers. You start seeing how those guys match up. That'll be one of the storylines. Then the Jaguars go to Denver, or rather go to London to face Denver just before Halloween. Again, Denver in that AFC West. They brought in Russell Wilson. That's going to be a whole new kind of look for Denver from what we've seen the last several years.
It's a tough year in the AFC. This one, I'm not going to do the W's and L's until a little bit later, but we can just put probably an L next to this one. That's a tough game. Those Broncos, we've been saying for a few years that they just needed a quarterback. They got one now
in Russell Wilson. And this starts a trend of consecutive games here against the AFC West. Las Vegas, a team the Jaguars will also see in the Hall of Fame game. It'll be a much different look in that one for sure. Comes to Jacksonville, and then a trip to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. And I will remind everybody that the last time the Jaguars went to Arrowhead Stadium, 2018, they were feeling good. They were coming off a win over the New England Patriots a couple of weeks earlier. They were coming off for avenging that loss in the AFC Championship game. Then they lost to Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. The Chiefs went on to start this run of contending and winning Super Bowls, while the Jaguars from that point on went downhill. Never an easy place to play. And again, AFC West quarterback, you got it there with Kansas City.
Yeah, definitely going to be another test for that defense. That's one where you hope that Trevor Lawrence and the offense are ready to go full steam ahead, because it's going to be a game of keep up more than likely.
All right, fine. Then we'll go on to the second half of the schedule, as it were, a little less than half. The bye week at week 11. If you have a young team, usually there's a point in the season where young players start to hit the rookie wall. And a lot of times it comes 10 or 11 or 12 games in, because they've now played as many or more games than they've played in college. So I like the week 11 bye week for the Jaguars. It's not too early. I think it's a good spot for this Jaguars team with a veteran coaching staff, with an NFL experienced coaching staff. I think it really comes at a good time.
We'll have to see if they can handle the bye week this year better than they handled it last year. Hopefully they can, and that would have gone in wherever the bye week fell in the schedule. At this point, it's definitely a good spot where you feel like you've gotten some of those tougher games out of the way. You do come off the bye week into a really tough matchup, but you've gotten Kansas City, you've got the London trip out of the way. You can kind of relax a little.
All right. And the next 2 weeks after the bye week, a little bit of a homecoming of sorts in some regards. Here in Jacksonville, week 12, the Baltimore Ravens. Calais Campbell coming back to Jacksonville if he's still around. He's re-signed with the team. That'll be one of the storylines. But Baltimore figures to be, again, one of the tough, physical, hard-nosed teams in the National Football League.
Yep, playing a catch-up and trying to stop Lamar Jackson. That will be a tough day for that Jaguars defense. But, again, Baltimore, you never know where they'll be, but more than likely it's in contention for the playoffs.
You would think. Not necessarily the case expected for the next game at Detroit, where Mark Brunell is the quarterback's coach. A little different kind of homecoming situation there. But that's another game that you would think, hey, if you're going to start putting W's on the board, that's one you'd consider.
It's definitely one that you're not just instantly putting an L next to. The Lions are another team that's in the middle of their rebuild. Some people like their draft class that they've brought in, but when it comes to rookies, you never know exactly what you're going to get, at least for that first season. So we'll have to see how things piece together. But the Lions expect to be another team that are probably near that Jaguars level when they start looking at wins and losses overall the entire season.
And we get all the way down to week 14 before the Jaguars see what I think most people would agree is their number one rival, the Tennessee Titans. Will Derrick Henry be back to full strength after missing the end of the season with injuries? Ryan Tannehill's there. They drafted Malik Willis. What will happen with the quarterback situation in Tennessee? For me right now, I think this is a year where the Titans take half a step back in the division. I think the Colts probably take half a step forward. Can the Jaguars take 2 steps forward? We'll see how it all plays out. But the road trip to Tennessee, again, coming late in the season, which we've been to some cold games in Tennessee, but this one is December the 11th. Could be seasonable, could be cold, depending on how it goes, but that's one of those slugfest kind of games on the schedule.
Weather aside, perfect scenario, they've pulled Tannehill, and this is Malik Willis show the rest of the way, because that means that the wheels have kind of fallen off for the Titans at that point.
Then an interesting game that should bring a lot of out-of-town fans or fans of another team. Dallas Cowboys always bring a big following. That is a Week 15 matchup, and that comes on December the 18th. A week to the day before Christmas. We'll get into the Jaguars' Christmas and holiday situation here in a moment. Cowboys probably going to be the favorite in the NFC East, you would think. And we'll see how it all plays out once we get to this point. But that could be a huge game for Dallas and could be a real statement game for the Jaguars.
Dallas is going to have a good offense, but they're a team that in big games they seem to fade away. Would we call the Jaguars-Dallas game a big game? We'll have to see just how the Cowboys have fared throughout the rest of the season. It could be there, especially when you start getting into those late games where they feel like they need to stack a few wins to get playoff position. You put a little pressure on, maybe all of a sudden the Jaguars are in the game.
All right, now let's move on to the final 3 games of the season as you take a look there at the last 5 games. Here we go, final 3 games. And we finally get to a primetime game for the Jaguars. It has been a long time since the Jaguars have been on Sunday Night Football or Monday Night Football. This is a Thursday night game. They've had a few of those through the years, but usually it's Tennessee. This time it's the Jets in a matchup between last year's top 2 picks. Trevor Lawrence, of course, for the Jaguars. Zach Wilson, the quarterback for the New York Jets. This is one that playing on Thursday, so they're not playing on Christmas. Thank you, Jaguars. We would thank you, NFL, for that. But another winnable game.
It is a winnable game. The Jets have been struggling. It'll be the Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence Bowl. We'll get a chance to actually see the two of them play against each other and see where they are in their second season. So definitely a game that will have a lot of eyes on it as people look at those past quarterback picks from a few years ago.
And then the final 2 games, both back in the division. So the Jaguars finished the year with back-to-back AFC South games at Houston on New Year's Day. No partying on New Year's Eve, folks. Don't do that if you're a Jaguars player or coach. And then to finish up at home against Tennessee, it's doubtful that the game against Houston is going to be a playoff implication game for either team. Could be a playoff implication game for Tennessee, just as it was for the Colts last year. We'll see how it all plays out, but the Jaguars will have a chance to finish up at home once again in 2022. It would actually be the 2023 end of things. So let's give our predictions, Jamal, on what we expect this year. And let's not necessarily go win-loss, but we'll put the wins up there. You're a little bit more optimistic than I am, but I can see it getting to 7 wins potentially. I've got them beating the Houston Texans twice. You've got them beating the Texans twice. You've got them opening with a win over the Commanders. I think that's the difference what we have here. Colts, Jets, Giants, Lions. So we both have sort of a similar expectation. You just think they're going to start off with a victory.
I think they
road.
start off the year 2-0. So I think it's a good start to the year, and then things kind of start to fall in line. By the bye week, I think I have them at 4-6. and then they win a few more games down the stretch there. But I have them starting the year 2-0, feeling pretty good. And, you know, with a young team like the Jaguars are, a new head coach, a second-year quarterback, especially after everything that happened last year, if they can start the season 2-0, look, all bets are off at that point because now you've got a quarterback that everybody expects to be great that's feeling good, and he's already got a couple of wins under his belt. You've got Doug Peterson strutting around handing out ice cream, feeling pretty good about himself. He's like, look, they only won 3 games last year, 2 games into the season. We're already there. You know, at that point, all bets are off, and really I could argue to raise that win column up a little bit if you start to see it. They have to take those steps early on.
I'm not against it. I just couldn't quite make the move yet. I'm going to hold the option to have the prerogative to change as we get closer to the start of the season. We'll do the wins, losses, probably again after training camp, maybe before training camp, but certainly after training camp ends and before the season gets underway to see how it all plays out. A couple of other interesting notes here. The Jaguars do not have a single stretch in the season where they have back-to-back home games in Jacksonville. Right. There's a stretch where there are 3 home games. The middle of those 3 is the London game. They have 3 instances where they have back-to-back games on the road. So we know with the 17-game schedule, you're going to have some times with Jamal when you have more, you know, you have the 7 home games or 8 home games, 9 road games. But when you have one of those games being in London, you kind of have 7 games in Jacksonville. But you have a lot of time for the Jaguars away, and you have a lot of time early in the season when the Jaguars aren't around, which will certainly make construction easier down around the stadium.
Right, and that was part of it. They were hoping to be on the road at least early in the season while a lot of the construction and things are going on, so that way it could ease the burden on some of that a little bit, because it is inconvenient. You know, the one thing with being on the road a lot, the Jaguars haven't been a very good road team. Not that they've been great at home over the years, but they haven't won a road game in America since 2019 when they closed down Oakland. So the old Coliseum there, that was a big win then, but now you say, well, we didn't want that to be our last road win. So at some point, hopefully this year, that streak will come to an end, and then all of a sudden all these losing streaks have kind of closed the books on them, and maybe you start to feel a little bit better as they move forward.
It also bears mentioning that this time last year, I think I had the Jaguars as a 6-win team. So we'll see. I have a lot more faith in Doug Peterson not having a total collapse of leadership that we saw in the 2021 season. All right, that'll do it for our look at the Jaguars 2022 schedule. You can see more online at news4jax.com. For those of you watching on News4Jax Plus, thanks for joining us there and on news4jax.com. For Jamal St. Cyr, I'm Cole Pepper. Thanks for watching, and we're getting ready for the season.